this video for a long time, and it's talking about the top 3 lies or myths, or let's call them fears that other people projected onto me, or other people have told me about mature age students doing a law degree. And I basically want to, in this video, show that these fears and these myths, as you may, are probably not as real, because I didn't experience that, or I will share some experiences with you that may contradict certain other experiences that people or advice that people have given you. So this is just something from what I've been hearing or what I went through, and so I wanted to share with you as well. So let's go. The top 3 things, or the 3 fears that have been projected onto me as a mature age student doing law school. Okay, so the first one is that you will feel old, because you will be going back to university at a more ripe age, and you'll be surrounded by 20-year-olds, and the whole vibe is going to be off, and it will be a bit difficult potentially to connect with people, and just generally feeling like, you know, I'm an adult and I need to get on with life. For me, it wasn't a problem at all. I didn't experience fear of being old. I specifically went and did the JD because I knew that there would be students there that were not all 21, and there was a diversity in terms of age, in terms of cultures, in terms of people coming from different countries. And I think if I were to do a law degree when I wanted to, which was when I was 21, I wouldn't have had the same maturity to probably understand a lot of the material and then apply it to real world scenarios. And so I do think that as a mature student I actually got more out of it, because it wasn't just a degree that I had to do straight out of high school, or another degree that I did straight after I finished my undergrad. I actually worked for a number of years in a different field, and so the going back to uni thing, yes, it's scary, and yes, it's something that, you know, you're not really prepared to do in your 30s, because nobody really says, oh, you know, you'll do one degree in your 20s and then another degree in your 30s. And the traditional view has been, or is that you go to university, you choose your profession at the ripe age of 16 or 17, and then you choose your degree, and then you really stick it out and build a career out of that. But whenever I talk to people who are, you know, in these positions of management or partners at law firms, I've never actually heard anybody say, oh, when I was 18 I dreamt of being a partner, then that's what I did. People usually tell me that they fell into it. They fell into the line of work that they're in. They kind of like got this opportunity somewhere, and then they kind of seem to like this, and, you know, their journey is definitely not linear, and neither should yours be. And I don't know why we limit ourselves that way, but that's just how we have been conditioned. And so this whole like, oh, you're too old thing is just a bit silly. And if anything, I actually felt younger when I was surrounded by people who were in their 20s, and I didn't have any problems making friends. I went on exchanges and I still made friends with people who were in their 20s, and I had the best time, because, you know, they taught me things, and my friends' ages range between anything, between the ages of 20 to 60, you know, or 60 plus, and I think that's great, because you can learn something from everyone. Everyone is on a different journey, a different path, and every generation is different in how they think and how they solve problems and the way that they absorb information. So the more people you know from different backgrounds and from different ages, the more you understand the world, the more you understand perspectives. And I think that's the beauty of it. And so going back to uni as a mature student is not something to fear. It's not something that will make you feel isolated. I mean, in my degree, I've had people who were in their 50s and 60s, and and doing law after a career in medicine or a career in accounting or engineering, and you know, people do that. And I think that was the unique experience about doing the JD, so I really enjoyed it as a mature student. I wouldn't have wished for a better experience. It was really cool, and I met so many interesting people, especially when I had the chance to travel. I traveled to Shanghai to study law with the University of Sydney, and that was a winter school unit which only lasted 3 weeks, and that happened after the first year, after I completed the first year of the JD. And usually there's nothing you desire less than doing another exam right after you've done 4 law exams at the end of the year and you're just kind of over it. But what I did is, in my first year, I finished all my law exams, and then 2 days later I jumped on the plane to study some more law. But it was in Shanghai, and it was awesome. And that particular unit was part of winter school. However, it was also a master's unit. So when you go to do electives, this was part of my electives. You will be able to choose what courses you do. So there's a bunch of core subjects in law school, and then you do electives, the ones that you actually select. And this was basically an introduction to Chinese law and principles of law in China. And I went with a bunch of students, JD and LLB from USyd. And then there were also University of Sydney students who were doing the master's degrees. And these were people who either didn't have law degrees, who were just working, you know, for banks or as consultants, and they just wanted to get a master's to further their career and development, so that they could choose a master's of law even though they didn't have a law degree. And then there were also other lawyers in the room who worked for various firms, and they were doing their masters to further their career again. So that was a really cool experience, because then I met people who were doing master's programs, and then I connected with a few of them, and that was really fun, just to see and hear people talk about their careers and you know, the reason they decided to study law and things like that. So you will get to meet really cool people as long as you put your hand up for opportunities, as long as you explore your options and stay curious, and never, you know, shut certain people out based on your beliefs. Or also, we do a lot of self-rejecting, so a lot of the times we will say, oh well, these people will never want to talk to me because I'm too old, or these people never want to talk to me because I'm not a lawyer. So we self-reject a lot, and so, you know, don't reject yourself before other people do. Like, give them a chance, give yourself a chance, and if you, like I said, if you stay curious, the age thing doesn't matter. If you feel young at heart, you will always feel young. If you feel old, you will feel old even if you're 20. You will feel old even if you're 16. And if you say to yourself, I'm too old to do this and that, you are probably too old to learn. You're probably too old to you know, pick up a new skill. You're probably too old to try new food. Like, these are the limits that we set on ourselves. So there's nothing in any book that says at this certain age you cannot learn, or at this certain age you cannot do something. So give yourself a chance. Number 2 fear was that, or the myth, shall I say, was that law firms, when you go to get your clerkship, or when you get to get your trainee contract, that law firms will not hire you because you are a mature age student or you're too old. I was a mature age student, and I got a clerkship, and I did the trainee program, and I did all the rotation, and I'm still working for a law firm in big law. And I remember when after completing the clerkship, I was invited by graduate recruitment at my firm to go and host this evening with students. So these like open nights that law firms would do in order to attract students to the firm, and then they could meet people who were in a similar position, just graduated, just started their job, and they could ask you questions. And a lot of the JD students that were there would come up to me probably not even know my age, and start complaining to me about how law firms will not hire them because they are too old or they are mature aged, and therefore there's some kind of discrimination that happens against them. I can't speak for all the law firms. Maybe there are certain criteria that others go by, but just based on the law firms that I've applied to and I interviewed with, and I've had a number of interviews with top mid-tier law firms for the clerkship and for other jobs, and the question of age never arose. It was never a something that I thought would hold me back. If anything, I tried to make that a plus. My previous experience, the fact that I was mature, the fact that I didn't need to be handheld, and I had all the required soft skills to then be able to speak with clients and to network efficiently and to ask questions and feel more comfortable in my own skin and things like that. And I think that really comes through when you start working and you start taking responsibility for things, and you will definitely stand out amongst other graduates that have never had a job or have never experienced anything else, and this is literally their first job out of university. And these kids are super smart, like they will come out of law school with top marks, and they'll all go to the top law firms and corporate lawyers where they want to end up, and it's all this like path to success. But there's a lot of soft skills that they potentially lack, and don't forget that you have so much to add as well with your experience. And I used to think that I would be starting completely from scratch, so my entire career of marketing would be just useless, and then I'd have to and a lot of things I had to learn again. But I do strongly believe that all of the skills that I acquired in marketing, project management, in PR, in understanding how stakeholders work and managing priorities and taking responsibility for my work, that really comes through. And so you are then able to outshine a lot of the graduates who basically just have this as their very first job and are just learning on the job as quickly as they can. And so these kinds of beliefs again about people discriminating against you because you're older, I mean, yes, potentially if you're ancient and maybe you shouldn't be working, you should be retiring, but in between that, we're supposed to have a really long career, and I think that we're not probably gonna retire until we're 80, because that's just what's gonna happen, and we're just gonna keep reinventing ourselves and keep studying, and things keep changing so quickly from a technological perspective. So the firms and the organizations and the corporates are going to have to be a bit more flexible as to who they hire, who they retain, and not necessarily expect people to retire at a certain age, because the whole world is different now. There's remote working, there's people doing contract work, there's people temping, there's people living in different countries and still working for a company based in another place. So I think there's going to be this whole revolution. So again, don't think that just because things were a certain way before, that that's how they're going to be going forward, especially with such a rapid change now post-COVID. And there's been this great resignation, right? And so I actually read articles where law firms were saying that, and courts, they were not gonna force people to retire anymore, because what was happening is they lack talent, especially people who have been in the industry for a long time, because not many people want to stay in the law for a long time, and there's this exit that happens between 5 to 6 PQE, and so law firms are keen to have these people who are in their 80s potentially, but a specialist and comes in as a consultant in their field. So I think there's opportunities for anyone, and so the age thing, again, not a barrier to entry. Maybe you'll feel sometimes like you're old and you're kind of sick of being the intern, but I mean, I really enjoyed it. I again looked at it open-mindedly, and I tried to absorb as much as I could, like learn really quickly and work with really effective people and ask the right questions and the wrong questions, just ask questions, and like read as much as I could and try different teams, because I did 3 different rotations, and then I moved to Dubai and started working on something completely different. And that's what the fun of it is for me. I mean, for some people maybe that's stressful, and it's better to stick to the one thing and then continue slowly growing from that, whereas I'm more of a rapid learner, so for me that kind of worked. But give yourself a chance again. You know, don't give up on your prospects, and don't think, oh, I shouldn't apply because they're gonna say no anyway. Well, you already, again, self-rejected, so just apply and then see what happens. The worst they can do is say no. So yeah, that's another one for you. Okay, and lie or fear number 3 is that people have told me, especially when I met mature students studying law, or people who are doing the master's program and they were already in a full-time job, earning like a 6-figure salary and having built a career in something, and they kept thinking, do I change into law? Do I continue doing what I'm doing? And a lot of people have said to me, oh, actually, you know, if I do change, that's like 3 more years of study, and then I have to start at the bottom, and then the salary is going to be really low, and then by the time I build up to what I have now, it's going to be forever, and it's not going to be worth it. And that was fully real when that was happening. So this was 2018, 2019, end of 2017, and at one stage in Australia, graduate lawyers were getting paid really low salaries in comparison to what the graduates in other countries, so for example the US and the UK, were getting for the same level. In Australia, law graduates were getting paid very little, and then in big law they were expected to work insane hours, and you know, the progression that you saw was very, very slow, and so your salary would like increase by tiny increments. And then yeah, it didn't make sense if you already have like a 6-figure salary, and then 10 years later in law you'd be making the same. Like, that's not very lucrative, that's not very attractive, and also you'd be working like twice as hard. And so I get where it came from, because the reputation was quite bad for some time. And then when I joined the firm, that's when we experienced, we started on a significant bump up from, you know, what other years were getting. So that was really good. And then on top of that, in Australia they introduced certain regulation to say that if a graduate lawyer that hasn't been admitted yet was working over a certain amount of hours per week, then you had to pay them overtime, because there was a minimum wage that was in place, especially before you got admitted, that you couldn't just abuse, you know, the young graduates and the hours that they work. So that was a really good rule that came in right before I started. So I think it kicked in on like the 1st of March, and I started that week. So that was really good, because anytime I did over a certain number of hours per day, I got paid overtime. It wasn't much, but it was something. And then during COVID, nothing was happening. Law firms weren't hiring graduates. If anything, I heard that a lot of people that had their contracts offered to them got those contracts revoked or paused. And so it was a bit chaotic, because people were like, well, I'm not getting hired, and law firms didn't want to hire the same amount of graduates, and nobody kind of understood what would happen after the pandemic. And because of this pause in general activity in terms of hiring, there's now a gap And the gap happened because the legal work didn't really stop. Like, there were lulls in certain industries, like projects, for example, because nobody wants to invest in a big infrastructure project when there is a recession. However, all of the other legal work was going crazy. So when I started, I was in restructuring, and you know, all banks wanted to know what was happening with the funds, and there were like different funds that were trying to restructure their businesses, and then we were also doing litigation involving fraud and other things. So that stuff just doesn't stop, and so we continued to be very, very busy. And then I went into real estate, and again, we were really, really busy there because there was all of these leases that needed to happen. There were amendments to leases because in Australia there were all of these rules that you couldn't evict your tenants, you couldn't increase your rent, you had to negotiate a rent decrease during the pandemic. So it was all just happening, and then on top of that there was a lot of some overseas investors were putting money into Australia as well. So that was very busy. And so generally law firms made a lot of money during the pandemic. Actually, a lot of companies made a lot of money during the pandemic because all of a sudden all of the expenses like flights and offices and, you know, food and parties and everything, that wasn't happening. And so firms were saving money, plus they weren't hiring enough people or graduates or basically anyone. They put a lot of jobs on hold, or they got rid of a bunch of people. So actually it was very profitable for a lot of these big companies and firms. And then the Great Resignation started happening. So once we got over the 2 years of the pandemic and the lockdowns, a lot of people wanted to quit their jobs because they were so over it. They were stuck in their house, they hated their job, everything they did was stressful because it was just job and bed. And so a lot of people quit or started quitting or started thinking about quitting. And on top of that, you don't have all this young talent, young lawyers coming in, because there used to be just like thousands of people lining up to get like one job. Now it's like there was nobody, and this 2-year gap all of a sudden was created. And I think maybe a lot of people postponed their studies as well because they just, you know, didn't want to do it, or some unis stopped their courses. And so the US then upped their salaries, the graduate salaries, which were already very, very high, and started stealing talent from Australia, from the UK. And then, you know, the UK firms all of a sudden were like, oh, we don't have people working for us. So they started upping their salaries for graduates. So people that just, you know, fresh out of university were getting paid more than like a 2-3 PQA associate. And then Australia finally joined. And so I think the last year I saw that they actually started to bump up graduate salaries, and the surreal wage war began. And so now I'm thinking, actually, if I had stayed in marketing and let's say I was there for the 4 years, would my salary have jumped to what it is now and what I'm earning now? And I don't know. I think it still would have been lower in marketing. But secondly, I feel like when I was working in corporate marketing, every year the salary would increase by like the inflation rate, which was like 3% or 5% or 10% maximum. Whereas when you work in a law firm, every year that you make it, your salary actually goes up. And so I think that that's something that other firms or other corporates can't really offer you as a guarantee almost, whereas in a law firm it is. So I think that's what a lot of people didn't realize, or I wasn't told that actually. I was told that lawyers don't earn much and work a lot and it pretty much sucks and they hate their lives. That's what I was told. And maybe some of it is true. Well, no, it's actually not true to that extent. It's definitely not true enough to talk you out of doing it. And definitely money shouldn't be your only motivator. But don't be afraid that it's, you know, you're gonna get paid peanuts and it's not gonna be worth it. And maybe if you're earning millions now, yeah, it's not gonna be like that, but for me it made sense. And so yeah. I hope that you've enjoyed this video on my 3 fears or 3 myths for mature age law school students, and hopefully this video has encouraged you that you can go and study law even if you are over the age of 30 or contemplating it as your second career. I wish you all the best, and you can ask me questions down below. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Thank you.